Hi everyone, my name is Emily. I'm 30, and I never thought I'd have to share this. This is my story, and it's not easy to tell. It's about trust betrayal and the life I thought I had slipping through my fingers. I never imagined my husband could lie to me, not just about small things, but about everything. And I was pregnant when I found out. This is the story of how I discovered the truth and how my world fell apart, the illusion of stability. I used to believe that ordinary days protected you, that if life stayed predictable, emails, coffee cups, the hum of computers, you were safe. That was before I learned how easily stability disguises decay. The office always smelled faintly of toner and burnt coffee. My desk faced the window, third floor, marketing department. Most mornings began with the same ritual. I'd arrive first, start the lights, unlock the shared drive, pretend to be the kind of person who loved routine. Across the courtyard, through another row of windows, I could see finance. That's where my husband, Mark, worked. Sometimes we'd wave across the glass, like kids in parallel classrooms. We thought it was cute. We met here, 5 years earlier, during a joint project between departments. Everyone said we were the company couple. HR even joked about including our wedding in the internal newsletter. I laughed, blushed, said no. At the time, I still cared what people thought. By the start of last year, things looked almost perfect. Promotions for both of us, a rented apartment near the river, weekend plans, health insurance. I had no reason to question the pattern. Then I missed my period. Pregnancy wasn't part of the plan, but when I saw the second line, something inside me softened. Mark hugged me, said all the right words. "It's okay, we'll handle it. We're ready." He even smiled, genuine, I think. For a few weeks, everything felt lighter. We stopped talking about quarterly goals and started browsing tiny socks online. Still, there were cracks. Subtle ones. He started staying late, closing the books. Sometimes he'd come home after midnight, smell faintly of perfume that wasn't mine. When I asked, he joked, "Maybe it's from the elevator. People spray half a bottle these days." I laughed back, but the sound felt foreign in my throat. Around the same time, the company began to change. Rumors about cutbacks, strange meetings behind glass doors. My boss, Elena, stopped forwarding project budgets. One afternoon, she sighed and said quietly, "Keep your resume updated, just in case." I tried to tell Mark, but he brushed it off. Marketing always panics first. Finance is solid. Trust me. He looked confident, too confident. That's when the first shadow of doubt appeared. Home became quieter. He'd eat dinner scrolling through his phone, answer messages I wasn't allowed to see. I told myself not to snoop, that trust was sacred, that relationships needed space. At night, I'd wake to the glow of his screen. He'd claim it was work. Sometimes he'd smile faintly, the kind of smile you give when you forget someone's watching. By February, I'd stopped believing his schedule. Claire appeared in my life like background noise. Subtle, harmless, easy to ignore. She was an accountant in Mark's department, sharp, ambitious, always dressed in muted gray suits. When we met at a company dinner, she greeted me too warmly. "So nice to finally meet you," she said. Her eyes lingered a moment too long. I dismissed it. Women often get unfairly blamed for men's behavior. Still, something about her calmness unsettled me. A week later, Mark mentioned her name casually. "Claire's helping with the new audit. She's efficient." He said it with admiration he rarely used for anyone else. By March, I was visibly pregnant. The office congratulated me. HR sent flowers. Mark acted proud in public, distracted in private. We rarely rode home together anymore. He said he needed the car for meetings. Once I took a taxi past his building late in the evening. His office light was off. That night I couldn't sleep. The baby kicked for the first time. I cried quietly, not sure if it was happiness or dread. My mother-in-law, Evelyn, called every weekend. She had a soothing voice that could turn any topic into moral advice. When I told her Mark seemed distant, she laughed softly. "Sweetheart, men get nervous before babies. Don't pressure him." It sounded reasonable, so I obeyed. But I noticed that she always defended him before I finished a sentence. Sometimes I wondered if she already knew. April arrived with financial reports and spring rain. Elena's warnings became reality. Layoffs began. People cried in the hallway. IT collected badges in cardboard boxes. That week, Mark became even more secretive. He wouldn't discuss the numbers. "Can't talk about internal data," he said. "Confidential." When I pressed, he snapped. "You of all people should understand boundaries." It felt rehearsed. I tried to distract myself with nursery planning. Soft colors, tiny clothes, optimism forced through fatigue. One evening, while browsing paint samples, I asked if he liked the pale green shade. He didn't look up from his laptop. "Whatever you want," he murmured. The next day, I painted alone. Sophie and Laura, my two closest friends, noticed the change immediately. Over lunch, Sophie leaned forward and asked, "Are you sure everything's okay with Mark?" I smiled too quickly. "Just work stress." Laura exchanged a glance with her. "He's not seeing someone, is he?" I laughed again, louder this time. The lie tasted metallic. Then came the first real sign. A Friday evening, Mark left his laptop open in the living room while taking a call on the balcony. The screen blinked, an incoming email. Subject line: "Can't stop thinking about last night." I froze. My hand hovered over the touchpad, shaking. The sender's name, Claire B. Before I could open it, Mark walked back in. He saw my face, closed the lid, said, "Work gossip. Don't." I didn't sleep that night. Saturday morning, I confronted him. He sighed, exasperated, not guilty. "You're paranoid. Claire's just a friend. We were talking about the audit." He left the apartment soon after. I stared at the closed door and felt the first real wave of nausea, the kind that has nothing to do with pregnancy. In May, the layoffs spread to our floor. People disappeared overnight. Elena left without saying goodbye. The company felt like a sinking ship, yet Mark acted untouchable. One night he said, almost proudly, "Finance always survives. We're essential." His arrogance scared me more than the layoffs. At my next prenatal appointment, the doctor told me the baby was healthy. I nodded, smiled, and felt nothing. When she asked if I had support at home, I lied again. Yes, a very supportive husband. She wrote something in her notes, looked at me for a second too long. I started writing everything down, dates, moods, odd phrases he used. Not out of paranoia, but survival. If truth disappeared, I needed proof it once existed. Late at night, while he slept, I reread those notes. The pattern formed slowly, like a photograph developing in the dark. Missed calls, cash withdrawals, sudden gifts for colleagues. Each detail was small, but together they spelled disaster. The apartment grew quieter after that. I stopped asking questions. I stopped pretending. Even the baby's kicks seemed muted, as if the small life inside me felt the tension. At night, I would sit by the window with a mug of tea, watching the city lights flicker, thinking, what am I missing? The silence around me was heavier than any argument. Mark didn't shout. He didn't fight. He just existed in the apartment like a ghost, leaving traces that I could barely interpret. I started noticing subtle changes in his habits. The way he tucked receipts into his desk instead of the folder he had used for years. The sudden interest in financial advice websites at 2 a.m. a perfume scent on his collar that didn't belong to me. Every detail chipped away at my sense of security. Sophie and Laura began to grow impatient. Sophie confronted me after a Saturday brunch. "You can't just sit there and do nothing. You know something's wrong." I shook my head. "Maybe I'm imagining it." Laura frowned. "You're not imagining it. I've seen the way he looks at Claire." I felt anger at first. Not at them, not fully, but at the situation itself. How could I feel this way about my husband, the father of my child, the man who once held my hand so tightly I thought he would break my bones? It was a slow burn, an ache that refused to be acknowledged. At work, things became suffocating. I couldn't concentrate on campaigns, meetings, or spreadsheets. The office felt like a cage. Even my colleagues noticed. Elena cornered me one afternoon. "You're distracted. If you need time off, take it." I nodded. "I'm fine." But I wasn't. The first major clue came from an email I stumbled across while using a shared presentation folder. I clicked by accident. Subject: "Lunch tomorrow? Just the two of us." From Claire B. It was a small line of text, almost invisible in the stream of corporate emails. But I felt it like a punch to the stomach. I didn't tell Mark I saw it. I didn't want an argument. I didn't want him to know I was aware. I just stared at the screen, my hand trembling. Later, at home, I imagined confronting him. "Who is she? Why are you lying? Do you even love me?" I rehearsed it for hours, pacing the apartment with my sweater sleeves over my hands. I didn't have the courage to speak aloud. Mother-in-law Evelyn's calls became more frequent. She sensed the tension, probably more accurately than anyone else. "Mark is under pressure," she said during one Sunday call. "He's doing his best. You're being dramatic." I didn't argue. Her calmness, which once comforted me, now felt like part of the betrayal. Even she was siding with him. I realized, slowly, that I was losing not just my husband but the network of people I trusted. Claire's presence at work was like a shadow. Every time she walked past my desk, I felt a wave of nausea. Her smile wasn't warm, it was knowing. Sometimes I caught her staring at Mark in the cafeteria, her hand brushing a folder over her chest like it was a secret message. I tried to avoid her, but avoidance didn't stop the emails or the whispers. One evening, I lingered behind in the office, pretending to work late. I saw Mark leaning over Claire's desk. Their conversation ended abruptly when he noticed me. He straightened, smiled, and waved casually, but I knew what I had seen. Pregnancy became the filter for my fear. I couldn't cry in front of Mark. I couldn't show weakness. I began writing little notes to myself, documenting every odd behavior, every suspicious action. The baby's kicks were sometimes harsh, almost accusatory. I'd sit in bed, rubbing my stomach, wondering if the child could sense the tension, the lies, the fracture of the home. In June, a company meeting confirmed my worst suspicions. Finance reports were inaccurate. Budgets were mismanaged. People were panicking. Mark was strangely calm. Too calm. After work, I followed my instincts and checked his email again while he showered. He'd changed the password. A part of me wanted to scream. A part of me felt relief. Finally, there was proof of denial. That night, I sat alone in the living room, dim light falling on the baby blanket I had folded hours earlier. Everything I had believed, his love, our trust, the stability of home, felt like a fragile house of cards. I didn't cry. I just sat and listened. The silence answered me with truth. I was alone in this. I began to notice how people in my life contributed to the illusion. Colleagues who smiled politely but whispered behind closed doors. Friends who tried to protect me but often silenced the truth. Even the mother-in-law, whose love I had relied on, seemed invested in keeping the secret safe. I realized that betrayal doesn't arrive in one catastrophic moment. It seeps slowly, quietly, through the smallest cracks in your life. By July, I started avoiding him emotionally. I no longer shared details of my day. I stopped asking about his meetings. The apartment became a neutral space. He existed on one side, I on the other. I focused on the baby, the small, undeniable life that depended on me. It became my anchor. Late at night, I typed notes in a password-protected document on my laptop. Mark smiled at Claire today. I saw it. He doesn't see me. He lies when I ask about dinner. His hand shakes when he deletes emails. Each note was a brick in the wall I was building around myself. Sophie and Laura tried to intervene again. Over dinner, Sophie said, "You can't live like this. You have to confront him." I shook my head. "I'm not ready." "Not yet." Laura was silent. Her eyes pleaded. I knew she wanted to protect me, but at the same time, she feared making the situation worse. I realized that I could only rely on myself. By the end of summer, the house felt like a cage. Mark's presence was cold. Claire's email threads haunted me. The company's instability mirrored my life at home. I knew something had to give, something had to break, but I didn't know when or how. All I knew was that I could no longer pretend. And deep down, I feared that the moment I faced the truth, the world I had built, home, husband, trust, would crumble entirely. The first signs of real danger didn't scream. They whispered. I arrived at the office one Monday morning to find a silence I hadn't noticed before. Colleagues avoided eye contact. Even the receptionist, usually cheerful, looked uneasy. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant and anxiety. I passed Mark's department on my way to my desk. The door to finance was closed. Lights dimmed. I could hear nothing, but I sensed movement inside, furtive gestures, murmured conversations. I shook my head. Paranoid, I told myself, but my chest felt tight. At lunch, Sophie called me. "I'm worried about you," she said. "You're withdrawn. Something's happening with Mark, isn't it?" I wanted to laugh, dismiss it. It's nothing. Work stress, pregnancy, hormones, all of it. But I knew the lie sounded hollow even as I said it. Claire appeared in the cafeteria again, sitting at the far corner with Mark. I froze, pretending to text. Their conversation wasn't loud, but the way they leaned toward each other, I knew. Their smiles were too easy, their laughter too private. I felt a tight knot in my stomach. When I returned to my desk, I tried to focus on the campaign spreadsheet in front of me, but numbers blurred. Words merged. My mind replayed the scene over and over, Mark's head tilting slightly, Claire's laugh. I had to leave. I stepped outside, inhaled cold air, and pretended the world was normal. By the middle of the week, rumors began to circulate. Someone whispered about finance discrepancies, accounting errors, missing invoices, the type of story that never reaches the public but changes lives inside a company. Mark smiled at me across the hallway. "Don't worry about it. It's fine." His voice was calm, too calm. I stared at him, tried to read his expression. Nothing. He was untouchable. One evening at home, I asked casually, "Mark, is everything okay with the audit?" He didn't answer immediately. "Why are you asking so much?" "I told you everything's fine." The lie rang louder than his words. I nodded silently. Later, I noticed a pattern. Every time I approached questions about work, he deflected. Small lies, small shifts. But together, they formed a mosaic I couldn't ignore. Mother-in-law Evelyn called again. Her voice was soothing, but I could feel the undertone. You have to trust him. Men sometimes need space. Don't push. You're pregnant. Focus on yourself. Her words weren't comfort. They were warning. Stop digging. Don't ruin things. I realized I was entirely alone. One Thursday, I lingered late at the office. I needed to be somewhere else. Anywhere else, but not home. I noticed Mark leaving his desk, whispering with Claire near the printer. Their hands brushed, accidental or not, I didn't care. My stomach churned. I wanted to scream, to run, to disappear. Instead, I stayed in the shadows observing. That night, I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. My pregnant belly pressed forward, and I felt a sharp, strange anger. This life, this child, deserved better than lies. I started keeping a journal. Every time Mark's actions contradicted his words, I wrote it down. Monday, Claire called him during lunch. Smiled too long. Tuesday, he stayed at the office late again. Perfume on collar. Wednesday, denied any lunch meeting with Claire. The act of writing felt like armor. Each entry fortified my awareness, my self-preservation. Sophie and Laura pressed me again. You need proof, Sophie said. You need to know the truth. I agreed silently, but I didn't yet have courage. At work, whispers intensified. I overheard someone mention missing funds. Another colleague said quietly, HR is investigating. I tried to ask Mark, but he walked past, saying, Ignore it. Nothing to see. Every denial deepened my suspicion. I discovered the first real evidence accidentally. He left his laptop open while grabbing coffee. I didn't plan to look. I told myself I wouldn't, but curiosity and survival instinct won. There it was, an email thread from Claire. Casual, intimate. They discussed meetings, shared jokes, subtle flattery. My chest tightened. My hands shook. The first undeniable sign. I didn't confront him immediately. Instead, I watched, observed, took mental notes. At home, he remained calm, smiling in that practiced way. I realized he counted on my ignorance, and so far I had complied. By late July, the office's instability reflected my personal life. Layoffs occurred quietly, one by one. Colleagues disappeared. Papers shuffled. Silence grew heavier. Mark's calmness was terrifying. He acted untouchable. He came home late, smiled faintly, and whispered, Trust me. Everything's fine. I didn't. One night, I followed the instinct I had ignored for months. I waited until he showered, then unlocked his laptop. Password had changed. A chill ran through me. Denial confirmed. I closed the laptop, breathing shallowly. When he returned, water dripping from his hair, he asked casually, Everything okay? I nodded silently. Inside, a storm raged. By August, the apartment felt like a battlefield. Mark and I coexisted without touching. Claire's emails and glimpses haunted me. Even my friend's attempts at intervention felt distant, almost useless. I began imagining life without him. Life without betrayal, without fear, without shadows in my home. But imagining wasn't enough. I needed proof. I needed confrontation. 16. Closing part of Act 2. The cracks in the mirror of my life had grown too deep. Trust wasn't just broken, it was gone. And every whispered lie, every hidden glance, every email thread became evidence of a truth I wasn't ready to face fully. Yet something in me shifted. I would no longer allow ignorance to protect me. I had to see, to feel, to understand exactly how deep this went.